Let's continue into Genesis 20. This may seem like a smaller story compared to the fire and judgment of Genesis 19, but it is incredibly important because here we see Abraham repeat an old mistake, God's mercy covering him again, and lessons about integrity, fear, and the sovereignty of God. This chapter is often overlooked, but when broken down carefully, it is full of truth for us today. I will take it verse by verse, explain deeply, link with other scriptures, and show what it means for us today and for the future. The title is Ikan, the God who protects his promise. Genesis 21-18. Abraham's fear and failure. Genesis 21-2. Greater than now Abraham moved on from there into the region of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. For a while he stayed in Gerar, and there Abraham said of his wife Sarah, "She is my sister." Then Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent for Sarah and took her. Abraham is traveling again, this time into the land of Gerar. Once again, he repeats the same mistake he made in Egypt. Genesis 12. Out of fear, he calls Sarah his sister, not his wife. Why does he do this? He is afraid that someone will kill him to take Sarah. Fear drives him to compromise the truth. This is very serious because Sarah is the one through whom the promised child will come. By giving her to another man's household, Abraham is putting God's promise in danger. Yet God's covenant cannot be broken by human weakness. The lesson is clear. Even people of faith can fall into the same sin twice. Abraham was a man of faith, but he was not perfect. Romans 3:23 says, "All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." The Bible does not hide the failures of its heroes because their hope, and all ours, is not in their perfection, but in God's mercy. God appears to Abimelech. Genesis 23-7. But God came to Abimelech in a dream one night and said to him, "You are as good as dead because of the woman you have taken. She is a married woman." Here is God's intervention. Abimelech takes Sarah, but before he can touch her, God appears in a dream and warns him. God tells him clearly, "You are as good as dead." This is strong language. Abimelech defends himself. He says he took Sarah in innocence, not knowing she was married. And God responds, "Yes, I know you did this with a clear conscience, and so I have kept you from sinning against me. That is why I did not let you touch her." This shows us two truths. God protects his covenant. He did not allow Abimelech to touch Sarah because the promised child would come through her. Nothing can stop God's plan. God restrains sin. Even unbelievers are kept from sinning sometimes by God's hand. This is called common grace. Abimelech thought he acted in innocence, but it was really God who prevented him. This reminds us that God is sovereign even over unbelievers. Proverbs 21:1 says, "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He directs it like a watercourse wherever he pleases." Abraham exposed. Genesis 28-13. Early the next morning, Abimelech summoned all his officials, and when he told them all that had happened, they were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham in and said, "What have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you have brought such great guilt upon me and my kingdom?" Now the tables turn. Abimelech, the pagan king, rebukes Abraham, the man of God. This is shameful. Abraham should be the one walking in integrity, but his fear brought guilt on others. Abraham explains, I said to myself, there is surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she really is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife. Here we see Abraham's excuses. He feared the people, assumed they had no fear of God, and tried to justify his half-truth. But a half-truth is still a lie when it hides the real truth. The lesson here is powerful. Fear makes us compromise, and compromise makes us a bad witness. Abraham was supposed to bless the nations, but here he almost brought judgment on them. How often do we, out of fear of people, hide our faith, compromise truth, or justify sin? Jesus said in Matthew 10:28, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. God restores Sarah and protects the promise, Genesis 20:14-16. Then Abimelech brought sheep and cattle and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham, and he returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, my land is before you. Live wherever you like. To Sarah he said, I am giving your brother 1,000 shekels of silver. This is to cover the offense against you before all who are with you. You are completely vindicated. Notice how God turns the situation around. Abraham, who had sinned, is blessed with gifts. Abimelech, who almost sinned unknowingly, ends up humbling himself, and Sarah is vindicated before all. This is not to excuse Abraham's failure, but to show that God protects his covenant even when his people are weak. God's promise depends not on man's faithfulness, but on God's. Romans 3:3-4 says, what if some were unfaithful? Will their unfaithfulness nullify God's faithfulness? Not at all. Let God be true and every human being a liar. Abraham the intercessor, again, Genesis 20:17-18. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife and his female slaves, so they could have children again. For the Lord had kept all the women in Abimelech's household from conceiving because of Abraham's wife Sarah. This is amazing. Abraham, who caused the problem, is the one God uses to bring healing. Abraham prays, and God opens the wombs of Abimelech's household. Why does God do this? Because Abraham is God's chosen prophet. Despite his failure, God still calls him to intercede. God's gifts and calling are irrevocable. Romans 11:29. This points us again to Christ. Unlike Abraham, Jesus never failed, never lied, never compromised. Yet like Abraham, he intercedes for us and God hears him. Conclusion. Genesis 20 teaches us even people of faith can fall again into the same sin. Do not trust yourself, trust God. Fear leads to compromise, and compromise damages our witness. God protects his promises even when we fail. His covenant does not depend on our strength, but his faithfulness. God restrains sin, even in unbelievers, to fulfill his plan. God restores and still uses his servants, even after failure. This chapter is both a warning and an encouragement. It warns us not to compromise out of fear, but it encourages us that God's grace is greater than our weakness. The story does not end with Abraham's failure. It continues with God's faithfulness.